So today I thought it might be helpful if I had a little chat about why you might be noticing some excess or changes in facial hair in the perimenopause and postmenopause. And conversely, you might be noticing that you have a little bit less hair on your head where you might like it to be. And the reason I decided to have this conversation today is, well, for a few reasons. In the last couple of weeks, I've had a number of patients presenting to me quite upset about hair thinning or receding hairlines. And I've also had a number of patients also in really quite upset regarding changes in facial hair and them feeling very anxious and self-conscious and spending really quite long periods of time dealing with what they feel is embarrassing facial hair. And to be honest, it culminated in a personal experience as I was driving along in the bright sunshine and caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and went, ooh, wonder when I grew that moustache. So welcome to the postmenopause. And I thought I would have a little chat with you about what is actually going on and what is causing this. Now, obviously, everyone is different and everyone has different hair growth as a baseline. And there definitely is a genetic tendency to have less or more hair. And there's often a big ethnic difference as well. And obviously, we think about hair often in a very gendered way. And we think of hair patterns as being maybe male or female or girls or boys or men or women. And those are very sort of stereotypical in various cultures and societies. But what I'm really talking about today is not so much that genetic hair difference, but more hair changes that are happening related mostly to hormones. And you've probably heard lots of hormone chat going on, definitely menopause and perimenopause and hormone replacement. And lots of people are talking more about things like testosterone in women than perhaps they've talked about in the past. And I thought it might be helpful to explain what is actually going on. And if you've got changes in your hair, growth in your face, and it doesn't worry you or you can't see them, then great, don't worry about it. You don't need to go looking for it. But what I also want to say is that conversely, it definitely does upset some people. It makes them feel very self-conscious. And I've even had patients who sit with their hand over their chin or over their mouth when they're talking because they're feeling quite self-conscious. So I thought it would be good to get this topic out there in the open and just confront it for what it is that it is definitely something that's a reality. And so let's talk about that kind of peach fuzz hair that everyone has on their face and body. And that's called vellus hair. And it's usually a white or pale blondie color in most Caucasian people. Obviously, people of other ethnicities might have darker hair, but it's a very soft, silky feeling hair. And for most people, it doesn't really bother them terribly much. Though, again, not speaking for everyone, but that's called vellus hair. And it's not really impacted so much in the menopause, in that what the main hair that people complain about is that whenever that vellus hair becomes what's called like a terminal hair. And terminal hair is like hair in your head or your eyebrow hair. And people get upset whenever they're starting to notice that maybe along their jawline or their chin area or their top lip that they're starting to develop this hair. And hairs that used to be that very vellus, soft, velvety hair are now being replaced by these coarse hairs that definitely catch your eye. And a bit like myself driving along in the bright sunshine in the car, looking in the mirror, it all was a bit magnified. And that's what people will often see, that it catches their eye when they're looking in a magnified mirror. So what's causing this? As we know, in the perimenopause and menopause, we've got dropping hormone levels and the proportions of hormones are changing. So as we've talked about before, women have testosterone. We have a lot of testosterone, though that's on the decline, usually from our 30s. But in comparison, we obviously in our 20s and 30s and 40s do have estrogen and progesterone, but those are on a much more rapid decline as we head into the perimenopause And then in the postmenopause, we have very, very little estrogen and progesterone. And so proportionately, although testosterone levels are much less than they were when you were younger, they're still in proportion much higher. And therefore, they're beginning to influence these hairs on our face. And this is what gives these hair changes, where you go from having this nice soft hair to having these sort of often dark, spiky hairs that grow at all sorts of angles and that people can find pretty upsetting. The other times that you can get influences on hair growth are in women who also have sort of hormones that are out of balance, and that's women with polycystic ovaries. And so as a doctor, whenever sometimes women come in and present with maybe irregular periods or weight gain, or in fact they themselves are perhaps coming in and wondering if they've got polycystic ovaries because maybe they're struggling to fall pregnant, then one of the questions that we would ask them is about excessive hair growth. And excessive hair growth isn't just always on the face, like I've talked about. So you can get this hair growth so often from the belly button down to the into the groin area. You can get it on the back. You can get it around the chest and nipple area. And so it definitely can make people feel quite self-conscious and concerned about what they're going to do and how they're going to stop this getting worse. And obviously, probably most people are aware of various hair removal strategies. You can tweeze and pluck and shave and do electrolysis and laser treatments and all sorts of things. But the reality is, until you probably get those hormones back in balance, then you're not going to stop it from happening. If you go on to hormone replacement therapy, for example, so if you start estrogen and progesterone, it's actually not going to suddenly make those dark hairs fall out or go away, but it is going to balance up the hormones so that if you remove some of those darker hairs, then it's more likely that you're not going to get as many more than if you didn't do anything about your hormone levels. So obviously the annoying thing is that in the perimenopause and postmenopause, here we are sprouting hair where we don't want it and noticing that our hair on our head, that perhaps for many of us has been our crowning glory, is suddenly seems to be disappearing. So you can get a receding hairline, a widening parting, or for some women you can actually get frank bald spots appearing in different parts of the scalp. And again, look, this can be related to hormones, but it is also very important that we actually rule out that there's any other issue going on in terms of other hormones as well. Because, for example, if you have an under or overactive thyroid, that may well be contributing. And some vitamin deficiencies can also contribute. Things like iron deficiency can be a problem. And then there's some medications that can be a problem, including some of the medications used for epilepsy, some medications used for hypertension, and some medications also used for depression can also impact the hair cycle. So it's definitely not something that you just want to sit at home and say, oh, well, it's just my perimenopause. You definitely want to go and have a chat with your doctor and just make sure that there's nothing else going on that can be easily remedied. The last thing that I want to talk a little bit about in terms of hair growth is the impact on eyebrows. So again, I often have women coming into me in their 40s, 50s and 60s complaining that their eyebrows are disappearing. This is also a hormonal driven and I suppose an aging phenomenon, and it definitely can make people feel that they're losing that framing or shaping of their eye and face. And it's something that, again, is definitely tricky to treat per se. But it's something that if you're thinking about hormone replacement therapy, it may well arrest some of that hair loss. But you might want to explore things like penciling in eyebrows or looking at eyebrow tattooing. I suppose the final thing that I wanted to comment on today was that don't ever feel that if you've got a few hairs and they're really upsetting you, that in some way that you're really vain or that it's ridiculous to be upset about it. And on the converse, if you've got lots of facial hair and it doesn't worry you one bit, then that's also great. So I think just consider it to be a very individual phenomenon. I've seen people very distressed and, to be honest, anxious and depressed about facial hair. And I've seen other women who absolutely don't care, embrace it and laugh it off, and don't seem to be remotely worried one way or another. So whatever one of those is you, then that's who you are, and you embrace who you feel like you want to be. And if you feel like it's something that you want to explore with your doctor or health professional, don't feel worried or embarrassed or feel like you're going to be judged, because it's actually a question that we frequently ask whenever we're thinking about hormones of all types in the body. And as I've said, whenever we're thinking about various medications, when we're thinking of polycystic ovaries, when we're thinking of perimenopause and postmenopause. And the great news is that there are treatments for hair loss on the head. There are lots of really quite new and innovative treatments, and there are some sort of older fashioned treatments that have been on the market for a long time that can make really quite a big difference and stabilize that hair follicle growth on the top of the head. So don't be suffering in silence. Go and seek help, and hopefully that helps. When I started this podcast back in December 23, I knew that I was lucky enough to have amazing conversations with various health professionals across all facets of medicine and allied health. And I knew that you would probably really enjoy being a fly on the wall to hear what we talked about. And that's how the podcast was born. And what you probably don't know is that this is a bit of a passion project. We don't have any sponsors or funding. And without your help, we won't be able to continue bringing you these great guests. So if you can please spread the word about the podcast, share it with someone who you think might benefit from the conversation that you've just listened to, or if you can leave us a review or a comment, it would mean the absolute world, because that actually helps the podcast spread further and get more people to hear our message, and hopefully allow us to invite bigger and bigger guests onto the show. And I would so appreciate you helping me back. Thank you. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.